We all know the feeling of staring at an overwhelming to-do list and just freezing. Society often writes this off as laziness, assuming that if you can't start a task, you simply lack the moral fiber to get it done. But a medical mystery from Louisiana suggests a different reality. Robert Philippe was a highly successful businessman who built an empire from a single gas station. Then, halfway through a South American vacation, his behavior changed. He became entirely apathetic. He stopped working, stopped reading, and spent his days just staring at the wall. Doctors were baffled. They put him through a battery of neurological tests, and the results were paradoxical. His physical health was fine. His memory was perfect. His IQ was intact. He wasn't depressed. He simply had zero drive to do anything. When they finally put him in an MRI machine, they found a tiny shadow near the center of his brain. A microscopic hemorrhage from a burst blood vessel had damaged a very specific cluster of tissue. That small, damaged cluster is known as the striatum. Neurologists believe the striatum acts as a kind of central dispatch, translating our decisions into physical action. It functions as the biological engine of human motivation. For Robert, that engine had simply shut down. This suggests that motivation is an organic process happening inside your skull, and like any engine, it requires a specific mechanical trigger to turn it on. To find out what triggers that engine, researcher Mauricio Delgado placed volunteers into an fMRI scanner and had them play an intentionally boring number-guessing game. The game was rigged. Every player won and lost in the exact same predetermined pattern. Even though the game required no skill and the outcomes were fake, the brain scans showed something fascinating. Every time participants guessed, their striata lit up with bursts of activity. They felt anticipation and excitement. Then, Delgado changed one variable. The computer made the choices for them. Instantly, striatum activity went entirely dark. Players reported feeling bored and wanted the experiment to end. The mathematical odds of winning or losing were identical in both versions of the game. The rewards didn't change at all. Yet the biological sensation of motivation vanished the moment the participants lost their ability to choose. The human brain does not just crave a final reward. It requires the autonomy of making a decision. The simple act of asserting control is the spark that fires up the striatum and generates the drive to act. Psychologists describe this perception of authority as the locus of control. It is a spectrum of belief about our agency over our surroundings. This graphic shows the locus of control spectrum. On the left is an external locus, the belief that events happen to you, dictated by luck or outside forces. On the right is an internal locus, the belief that your own choices dictate your outcomes. We can see how this mindset dictates behavior in an experiment involving fifth graders and difficult puzzles. Researchers found that praising children for being smart forces an external locus of control. Since kids view intelligence as an innate trait they can't change, they assume their success is outside their influence, causing them to give up quickly. Conversely, when researchers praised them for their hard work, they triggered an internal locus. Because effort is a choice, students felt control. They eagerly took on harder puzzles and pushed through the difficulty for much longer. This same dynamic dictates stamina in the workplace. In an Ohio manufacturing plant, workers were empowered to make small choices about their shifts and uniforms. Even though the pay and the tasks stayed the same, productivity spiked by 20% within 2 months. Because they were no longer just following orders, their mental energy didn't deplete as quickly. Shifting a person's mindset from external to internal through the act of giving them a choice is the mechanism that generates willpower. The United States Marine Corps used this science to solve a recruitment crisis. By the late 1990s, leadership noticed that new recruits were arriving as directionless teenagers, accustomed to simply following instructions. They lacked the internal drive required for unpredictable environments. To fix this, General Charles Krulak redesigned boot camp. Instead of enforcing blind obedience, drill instructors began placing recruits in chaotic, high-stress situations where they were forced to make rapid, independent decisions. The goal was to instill a bias toward action. By forcing recruits to take control of small choices, the Marines reawakened those internal loci of control, transforming passive civilians into self-motivating troops. If the military can successfully engineer self-starters out of apathetic teens, personal motivation is a trainable skill, not an inherent gift. The primary barrier preventing you from starting a difficult task is a lack of perceived control. To overcome this, you must transform a mandated chore into an active choice. If you are staring at a dreaded inbox, don't just start at the top. Assert your authority by intentionally choosing to reply to an email sitting in the middle of the pile. If you're struggling to begin a difficult report, skip the introduction and decide to draft the conclusion first. Asserting any form of arbitrary control over a task reawakens the striatum and kickstarts your momentum. Small choices are effective for getting started, but an arbitrary decision is insufficient to sustain your drive through long-term, grueling effort. The Marine Corps solved this by training recruits to constantly ask each other why. Why carry this heavy stretcher? Why climb this obstacle? This question serves a precise biological purpose. It explicitly links a small, painful choice, like taking one more step up a hill, to an overarching personal value, like becoming a leader or providing for a family. Answering the question proves to your brain that your current suffering has a purpose. You remind yourself that you are the author of a meaningful life, rather than just a participant taking orders. True, enduring motivation arrives when we assert control over our daily actions and tie those small choices directly to our deepest values.